The day my parents showed up and told me to get out of their house, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because they had no idea how badly they'd miscalculated. I'm 28 now, and I never thought I'd end up in a legal and emotional standoff with my own family over my grandparents' estate. But the truth is, I saw this coming years ago, and I planned for it. Right after I graduated with my accounting degree, the very first thing I did wasn't celebrate. It wasn't travel. I sat down with an estate attorney and made sure everything my grandparents owned, every asset, every property, was secured inside a trust. Because I knew exactly who would come knocking. And I was right. To understand why I went that far, you need context. This isn't just about money. It's about years of watching people who were supposed to love us treat my grandparents like an open wallet. It's about entitlement that never got checked, and only got worse with time. So yeah, this story gets messy. My grandparents, Frank and Dorothy, raised me since I was 5. My parents, Gerald and Patricia, didn't exactly fight for custody. They dropped me off like I was a piece of luggage they didn't feel like carrying anymore. I still remember that day way too clearly. I was standing in the driveway with a tiny suitcase and my stuffed bear. My mom was crying, but it felt off, like she was performing. My dad barely looked at me. He kept glancing at his watch like he had somewhere better to be. It's just temporary, they said. Just until we get settled. I didn't know it then, but temporary meant 6 months of them chasing some shady water filtration business that turned out to be a pyramid scheme. They lost everything. But by then, I was already home. I had my own room. I had routines. I had people who actually showed up. I started calling them Grandma and Grandpa without even thinking about it, and for the first time, that word meant something. Their house wasn't just a place to live either. It was this old Victorian in a historic part of Philadelphia, built in the late 1800s with creaky floors, stained glass windows, and a wraparound porch that somehow made every evening feel calmer. That house had history. Real history. It had been in my grandfather's family for generations, passed down and cared for, not flipped, not sold off, not treated like a quick profit. And it wasn't the only thing they had. They owned a few rental properties too, nothing flashy. A duplex in West Philly and a couple of row homes further south. My grandfather bought them decades ago, fixed them up himself, and rented them out to working families at fair prices. He wasn't trying to squeeze every dollar out of people. He just believed in stability, both for himself and for others. Then there were the investments. 40+ years working as an accountant, living below his means, quietly building something solid. Index funds, bonds, blue-chip stocks. Nothing risky. Just discipline and time. By the time I moved in, their portfolio was already approaching 7 figures. Altogether, everything they owned came out to around $3 million. But here's the thing, I didn't grow up thinking of it like that. To me, it wasn't an estate. It was my home. My safe place. The only place that ever actually felt like family. And maybe that's why, when my parents showed up years later acting like they were entitled to it, something in me just snapped into place. Because they saw dollar signs. I saw everything I could lose. And maybe I went too far trying to protect it, but at the time it felt like the only way. So yeah, that's where this starts. AITA for locking everything down before they even had the chance to ask? By the time I was old enough to notice patterns, my life with my grandparents felt steady. Predictable in the best way. Every morning had its rhythm. I'd wake up to the smell of something baking, always something. Mondays were blueberry muffins. Wednesdays banana nut. Fridays chocolate chip. Grandma Dorothy ran it like a quiet system. Rise and shine little numbers guy, she'd call from the kitchen. That nickname stuck because, apparently, at 7 years old I thought sorting baseball cards by batting averages was more fun than actually playing baseball. Grandpa found it hilarious. He didn't push me to be different. He leaned into who I already was. That was kind of their thing. Grandpa Frank taught me how to fish at this small park nearby. I was terrible at it. I tangled lines, dropped bait, scared off fish, you name it. He never got frustrated. Patience, Tyler, he'd say, calmly fixing whatever mess I'd made. Good things come to those who wait. At the time, I thought he was talking about fishing. Turns out, he meant a lot more than that. Evenings were quieter. We had this entire room dedicated to books, an actual library. Floor-to-ceiling shelves my grandpa built himself. We'd all sit there each with our own book, not saying much. But it never felt silent in a bad way. Sometimes one of them would read a line out loud. Something interesting. Something worth sharing. And we'd just talk about it for a minute before drifting back into our own pages. Grandpa loved history. Grandma was into mysteries. I bounced between everything, eventually landing on finance stuff way earlier than most kids would. Sunday mornings were different though. Those were sacred. Big breakfast. Eggs, bacon, biscuits, fresh fruit. The whole thing. And we didn't rush it. We'd sit there for hours just talking. About school, current events, random questions I had. They never talked down to me. Not once. Even when I was a kid, they treated my opinions like they mattered. That kind of respect sticks with you. It shapes you. From them, I learned what consistency actually looks like. What integrity means in real life, not just as a word. Your word is your bond, Grandpa used to tell me. Break it and you lose something you can't buy back. And he lived that way. If he promised a tenant a repair, it got done. If he said we were going fishing Saturday, we went. Didn't matter if it was raining. Grandma, on the other hand, focused more on independence. You need to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, she'd say, usually while showing me something practical. Cooking. Budgeting. Changing a tire. She'd grown up during hard times. She didn't trust comfort to last forever. Especially when people try to knock you down, she'd add. At the time, I didn't think much of that part. I probably should have. Because while my life with them felt stable, my connection to my actual parents was anything but. Complicated would be the polite way to describe it. The honest version? They were basically absent, unless they needed something. They'd show up maybe twice a year. Christmas was almost guaranteed. Sometimes a random visit in between. But after a while I started noticing a pattern. Dad would call a few days before. Suddenly interested in my life. Asking about school. Acting like a normal parent. Then they'd arrive, big smiles, loud energy, stories about whatever new business they were chasing. At first it felt nice. Then it started feeling rehearsed. Every visit followed the same script. First, the over-the-top affection. Hugs that lasted a little too long. Compliments that didn't quite land right. Questions they didn't really wait to hear answers to. Then came the subtle shift. Comments about the house. The neighborhood. How well my grandparents must be doing. And that's when I knew what was coming next. There was always a story. Something urgent. Something unfortunate. Something that just happened. Car trouble. Medical bills. A can't-miss business opportunity. Expenses that somehow couldn't wait. And then, the ask. It was always framed like a loan. It never was. Not once in over 20 years did they pay anything back. I didn't fully understand it when I was younger. I just knew something felt off. But one Christmas when I was 12, that feeling finally turned into something clearer. And that's when things really started to change. Looking back, I think the moment I really started connecting the dots was one Christmas when I was 12. At first, it felt like any other visit. My dad showed up full of energy, talking fast, shaking my grandpa's hand like they were business partners instead of father and son. He spent most of the day pitching his next big thing. Door-to-door prepaid legal services. Apparently, all he needed was $5,000 to buy into a territory. "This is it, Pop," he kept saying. "This one's different. This one's going to make us rich." I remember watching my grandpa listen, really listen like he always did. Calm, patient. Giving him the benefit of the doubt, again. In the end he handed him $3,000. Not the full amount, but enough. By March the company had been shut down by the state for fraud. Dad never brought it up again. Never mentioned paying it back. Years later I asked my grandpa why he kept helping him. He just sighed and said, "Some lessons cost money. I learned my son isn't good with responsibility, or money." That wasn't a one-time thing either. My dad had already filed for bankruptcy twice before I even turned 10. Once when I was 6. Again when I was 9. And both times my grandparents didn't hear it from him. They found out when creditors started calling their house, because he had been using their address without asking. That kind of thing became normal. My mom wasn't much different. She bounced from one opportunity to another: diet supplements, random stocks, essential oils, travel memberships. Every call to my grandma started the same way. Excitement, big promises, talk about 6-figure income and early retirement. 3 months later it would flip. Tears. Panic. Another story about how she'd been scammed. Another request for help. And through all of it they kept living like money wasn't real. Leased cars they couldn't afford. Designer clothes on maxed-out credit cards. A rented townhouse in a neighborhood they pretended they owned in. It wasn't just bad decisions. It was a lifestyle built on pretending. And my younger sister, Lindsay, she grew up right in the middle of that. She's 7 years younger than me and honestly she picked up on everything. By her teens she didn't just understand how to manipulate people, she was good at it. Scarily good. There's one incident I still can't shake. I was 21, home from college for Thanksgiving. My grandma had these antique brooches, nothing insanely valuable, but they meant everything to her. They'd been passed down from her mother. During dinner, Lindsay somehow slipped 3 of them into her bag. The next day, she pawned them for $200 and bought concert tickets. When my grandma noticed they were missing, she was heartbroken. She didn't accuse anyone, just asked if we'd seen them. Lindsay didn't hesitate. She started crying and said she saw me looking at them earlier. And just like that, my parents believed her. No questions. No hesitation. I remember standing there trying to explain and realizing no one was actually listening. The truth only came out because the pawn shop called. Lindsay had used my grandma's name. You'd think that would have changed something. It didn't. She's just a teenager, my mom said. They make mistakes. My dad even added, at least she didn't break them. That was it. No real consequences. Another time, she memorized my grandpa's credit card number and spent $1,500 online. When the bill showed up, she shrugged it off like it was nothing. I thought it was okay. Family shares things. My mom actually defended her. Said we should be teaching her financial responsibility, not punishing her for being confused. My grandpa paid the bill. He always paid. But I started noticing something in him around that time. A kind of quiet exhaustion. Not anger, just disappointment. The kind that builds slowly. After one especially bad visit, where Lindsay stole cash from my wallet and somehow tried to blame it on the mailman, my grandma pulled me aside. Maybe she should come live with us, she said softly. Maybe she'd turn out different. For a second, I thought that might actually happen. But my parents shut it down immediately. Lindsay was their baby. And honestly, she was the perfect kid for them. She didn't need much attention. She didn't ask hard questions. She knew how to get what she wanted without effort. Why would they give that up? The truth is they didn't want a parent. That's why they left me. I needed structure. Attention. Stability. Lindsay? She adapted to chaos. And as my grandparents got older, as their health started to decline, all of those patterns, every bad habit, every manipulation just got worse. And the tension in the family? It wasn't building anymore. It was starting to crack. By the time I got to college, things started to shift, and not in a good way. I was still living at home, juggling classes and helping take care of my grandparents. That part felt natural. They'd taken care of me my whole life. Now it was my turn. But my parents? That's when their interest stopped being subtle. At first, it was just more frequent calls. My dad suddenly wanted updates, specific ones. How's your grandpa doing really? Have they updated their will? Who's managing their finances these days? It didn't feel like concern. It felt like reconnaissance. My mom took a different approach. She'd send emails, links to retirement communities, articles about downsizing, little comments about how a big house like that must be overwhelming at their age. Nothing direct. But the message was clear. And every time they visited, the atmosphere changed. Conversations would drop the second I walked into the room. Voices would lower. Doors would close halfway. I didn't think much of it at first. But then it kept happening. Meanwhile, I threw myself into school. Honestly, it was the one thing I could control. My grandparents backed me completely, always had. They didn't waste money on trends or gadgets. Instead, they invested in things that lasted. Books, museum memberships, trips that actually taught me something. At 16, I got a part-time job at the local library. They told me I didn't have to, but I could see the pressure building. Medical bills, property taxes, everything adding up. I wanted to help. Choosing accounting as my major wasn't random either. It came from something I witnessed my senior year of high school. There was this older couple in our neighborhood, the Hendersons. Nice people. Quiet. Their son convinced them to give him power of attorney. Within months he drained everything. Their savings. Their accounts. Gone. Watching that unfold, it stuck with me. The betrayal, the helplessness, it wasn't just financial. It broke them. That's when I decided I wanted to understand money, systems, legal protections. Everything. Not to get rich. But to make sure something like that never happened to my grandparents. Or to anyone like them. College itself was brutal. Not because of the classes, I could handle those. It was everything else. My grandpa's health started declining fast. Serious heart issues. Multiple surgeries. Constant monitoring. My grandma was diagnosed with early-stage dementia. I had options to go to better schools. Scholarships. Bigger programs. I turned them all down. I stayed local so I could be there. And that last year? It nearly broke me. I'd wake up at 6 a.m. to help my grandpa with his medications and breakfast. Get to class by 7:30. come home midday to check on them. Back to campus for afternoon lectures. Then evenings were more caregiving, dinner, meds, making sure everything was stable. And after that, studying. Late into the night. Repeat. Every single day. My social life didn't just shrink, it disappeared. Friends would invite me out and I'd always have the same answer. I can't. I need to be home. Dating? Not even a possibility. But I never resented it. Because to me this was simple. They had shown up for me when I needed it most. This was what showing up looked like in return. The day I graduated, it hit me all at once. It was one of those perfect spring days. Warm, bright, everything feeling hopeful. Standing there in my cap and gown, waiting to walk, I scanned the crowd. And I saw them. My grandpa in a wheelchair, oxygen tank beside him. Just getting him there had taken days of planning, special transport, coordination with the school, backup plans for everything. His doctor had advised against it. He didn't care. He was there. My grandma sat next to him, dressed up like it was a holiday. She looked a little lost at times, like she wasn't entirely sure what was happening. But every time our eyes met, she smiled. During the ceremony, I could see her leaning over, asking my grandpa questions. And I knew what he was saying over and over again. He's graduating. That's our grandson. And in that moment, everything I'd sacrificed felt worth it. But at the same time, there was this quiet thought in the back of my mind. If things were already this hard now, what was going to happen when they got worse? They weren't supposed to be there that day. Honestly, with everything going on, the hospital visits, the oxygen tank, my grandma's memory slipping in and out, it would have made sense if they stayed home. But they refused. Wild horses couldn't keep us away, my grandpa said that morning, while I helped him with his tie because his hands were too shaky to do it himself. We've been waiting for this since the day you moved in. That stuck with me. Because they meant it. My parents, on the other hand, didn't even show up. They'd had their invitations for months. I made a big deal out of it, nice printed cards, clear schedule, everything. Mattered to me. My mom even RSVP'd yes. Asked what time they should arrive. Lindsay texted me, wouldn't miss it for the world. At 7 a.m. the morning of my graduation, I got a message from my mom. Car trouble. Won't be able to make it. Congrats. That was it. No apology. No attempt to reschedule. Nothing. And the thing is, I wasn't even surprised. That had been their go-to excuse for years. Car trouble. It covered everything, from birthdays to holidays to anything that required actual effort. What hurt wasn't that they weren't there. I'd gotten used to that. It was how little effort they put into pretending to care. Still, when they called my name and I walked across that stage, I looked out into the crowd. And I saw my grandpa crying. Not tearing up, actually crying. Tears running down his face like he wasn't even trying to hide it. My grandma was clapping so enthusiastically that someone nearby had to gently ask her to keep it down. That moment, it was everything. After the ceremony, they waited patiently while I took pictures with classmates. Then my grandpa insisted on standing up, despite the pain, despite how hard it was. He pulled me into a hug. Your grandmother and I are so proud of you, he said, his voice shaking. You're going to do great things, Tyler. Great things, my grandma echoed, catching one of those rare clear moments. Your degree says accounting, but your heart says justice. Don't lose that. We went out to celebrate afterward. Their favorite Italian place, the one they'd been going to since before I was born. The owner recognized them immediately. Gave us the best table in the place. No one rushed us. We stayed for hours. We talked about everything, jobs, the future, old memories, random stories we'd heard 100 times before but still laughed at. It was perfect. That night, when I was helping my grandpa into bed, he said something I didn't fully process at the time. Your parents don't know what they're missing, he said quietly. Their loss is bigger than they realize. 3 weeks later, he was gone. I found him. I'd been up late working on job applications when I realized something felt off. It was around 3 a.m. and I hadn't heard him get up like he always did. That routine had become so normal that the silence felt wrong. I went to check on him. He looked peaceful. Like he'd just fallen asleep while reading. The book was still open on his chest. The doctor later said it was his heart. That he probably didn't feel anything. That it was as peaceful as it could be. But that doesn't make it easier. Peaceful doesn't fill the silence that's left behind. I sat there for a long time before calling anyone. Just holding his hand. Saying goodbye. Thanking him for everything. 6 months later, my grandma followed. Officially, it was pneumonia. But I knew better. She'd lost him. And after that, she just faded. Her dementia got worse quickly. Some days she didn't recognize me. Other days she'd call me by my grandpa's name and talk to me like I was him. At first it hurt. Then I just went along with it. If that made her feel safe, it was worth it. About a week before she passed, she had one completely clear day. No confusion. No hesitation. She grabbed my hand and looked straight at me. "Tyler," she said, steady, certain. "You are our greatest accomplishment. Not the house. Not the properties. Not the money. You," she repeated. "The man you've become." I didn't know what to say. Then she added something else. "Frank and I made sure everything is protected. Your parents can't touch it. You don't need to worry about that." That was the first time she'd ever said anything like that out loud. "Just promise me something," she said softly. "Promise me you'll be happy. And that you'll find people who love you the way we do." I nodded. I promised, even though, at the time, I wasn't sure I knew how. She passed 3 days before Thanksgiving. I was sitting beside her bed, holding her hand, reading from one of her favorite mystery novels. I don't know if she could fully understand the words anymore, but I like to believe she could hear my voice. That she knew she wasn't alone. That she felt safe. When she took her final breath, it was quiet, gentle. And standing there, still holding her hand, I made a promise, one I didn't say out loud. I would protect everything they built. Everything they stood for. Everything they gave up to give me a life their own son never managed to build. The funeral felt unreal. My parents and Lindsay showed up like actors stepping into a role. Perfect black outfits, expensive ones, the kind I knew they couldn't actually afford. Polished, somber, saying all the right things. But if you paid attention, it didn't take long to see what they were really there for. They weren't talking to people to grieve. They were networking, chatting up distant relatives, making small talk with neighbors, asking questions that had nothing to do with loss, and everything to do with the estate. I watched my dad casually ask my grandparents' attorney for her business card, then their financial advisor, like it was some kind of opportunity. At one point he even leaned over to me and asked, "So, when's the will reading?" Like we were in a movie. What he didn't know was, there wasn't going to be a moment like that, because I'd already taken care of it. About a year before my grandpa passed, during a rare stretch where he was feeling a bit stronger, he pulled me aside. "Tyler," he said, gripping my hand tighter than I expected, "I know what your parents are like. I'm not blind." He paused, catching his breath. "Your grandmother and I have watched them circle for years." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. "We're putting everything into a trust," he continued. "And you're going to be the trustee." I remember feeling caught off guard. "That's the only way to protect it," he added. "But you need to be careful. Don't tell anyone until it's absolutely necessary." From that point on, things moved quietly, but deliberately. Their estate attorney, Nancy Crawford, had known them for decades. She was sharp, detail-oriented, and didn't miss anything. Together we built something airtight. The house, the rental properties, the investments, everything went into the trust. And I was given full control as the sole trustee. My parents and Lindsay? They weren't included. Not even as a footnote. Nancy made that very clear during one of our meetings. "Your grandparents knew exactly what they were doing," she told me. "They wanted to make sure their life's work stayed protected, and in the hands of someone who actually values it." After the funeral there was a meeting, but not the dramatic scene my parents were expecting. No envelopes. No suspense. Nancy simply explained that all assets had been placed in a trust, and that I was responsible for managing it. That was it. You could see the shift immediately. My dad forced a smile. "Of course. We understand. These things take time. We're here to support Tyler." It sounded supportive. It wasn't. It sounded like they were stepping back. They weren't. They were recalculating. For the first few months I stayed in the house. Alone. Surrounded by memories that hit harder in the quiet. At the same time I started working at an accounting firm, ironically handling estates and trusts, helping other families navigate situations just like mine. And while I was doing that, my own family started applying pressure. Subtle at first, then not so subtle. Calls about how the house was too much for one person. Suggestions about selling while the market was hot. Ideas about liquidating assets to make things easier. Every suggestion had one thing in common. They somehow ended with them getting a share. Lindsay was the worst. She didn't even pretend. She started showing up unannounced, sometimes with friends, giving them tours like it was already hers. Talking about when she moves in. One day I came home and found her measuring the windows. 4 curtains. I just stood there for a second trying to process it. "What are you doing?" I asked. Planning ahead, she said casually. This place needs an update. I have great ideas. Lindsay, you don't live here. She smiled. Not yet. That smile. I can't even explain how much it got under my skin. That's when I realized this wasn't going to stop on its own. So I started documenting everything. Every call. Every visit. Every comment about selling or sharing the estate. At first it felt paranoid. But something told me I was going to need proof sooner rather than later. Up until that point, I thought I was being overly cautious. Then my friend Owen, who went into estate law, looked at me one night and said, I'm serious, document everything. Calls, texts, emails. If this turns into a fight, you'll need proof. At the time it felt a little extreme. It didn't later. Because about 8 months after my grandma passed, things escalated fast. I came home from work one evening expecting a quiet night. Instead, I walked into my living room and found my parents sitting there like they owned the place, along with some guy in a wrinkled suit who immediately introduced himself as a notary. That's when I knew something was off. My dad stood up, smiling like he'd already won. Tyler, he said, we've been patient. But it's time to face reality. I didn't respond. I just waited. This house is too much for you to handle alone, he continued. Your mother and I have decided to take over the primary residence. You can focus on your career. Then he gestured toward the guy with him. We've already prepared the paperwork. We just need your signature as trustee to finalize the transfer. For a second, I honestly didn't know what to say. They had brought a notary into my house, without telling me, expecting me to just sign over a multi-million-dollar property because they'd decided it made sense. This is my home, I said finally. And I'm not signing anything. My mom's face crumpled instantly. Tears. Right on cue. How can you be so selfish? She said. We're your parents. After everything we've done for you? That's when something in me snapped. What have you done for me? I cut in. Came out sharper than I meant. But I didn't take it back. You dropped me off here when I was 5. You barely showed up. Grandpa and Grandma raised me. They paid for everything. They were there for every moment. I could feel my hands shaking, but I kept going. Where were you? Chasing another opportunity? My dad's face went red. We are still your parents, he shot back. And we have rights. That house belonged to my father. It should pass to me, not to some kid who got lucky with a trust. Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing, I said. Now please, leave. There was a long pause. Then my dad pointed at me and said, This isn't over. You'll regret this. And just like that they walked out. I wish that had been the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next few weeks, I started getting letters from some low-budget attorney they'd hired. Threats about contesting the trust. Claims of undue influence. Legal language meant to intimidate. I took everything straight to Nancy. She barely reacted. These are empty threats, she said, almost amused. The trust is solid. Your grandparents were fully competent. Everything was documented properly. So legally, I was safe. But emotionally, I knew better. My parents weren't the type to just give up. They just changed tactics. And that's exactly what they did. Last week, I took a few days off to visit Owen for his birthday. I needed a break. Some distance. When I came back Friday afternoon, I knew something was wrong before I even got out of the car. They were all standing on my porch. My parents, Lindsay. And they looked confident. Not angry. Not stressed. Confident. Tyler, my mom called out, smiling like nothing had ever happened. We're so glad you're home. We need to talk. That tone alone made my stomach drop. My dad didn't waste time. We've had the house transferred into our names, he said like he was announcing good news. Everything's been filed. It's done. I just stared at him. What are you talking about? Lindsay stepped forward, holding a folder full of documents. We found a judge who understood the situation, she said. The trust was invalid due to undue influence. The house has been transferred to Dad as the rightful heir. She sounded proud. Like she'd accomplished something. You have until Friday to move out, my dad added. We're being generous giving you 5 days. My heart actually skipped. None of this made sense. Let me see that, I said, reaching for the papers. My dad pulled them back immediately. No need. You'll get copies when you're out. Take your personal stuff. Everything else stays. It belongs to the house. I felt my chest tighten. This is insane, I said. You can't just forge documents and steal someone's house. And for a second, I thought maybe they'd crack. But they didn't. They just kept smiling. Like they knew something I didn't. Forge? my mom said, clutching her chest like I'd just insulted her. How dare you? Everything was done legally. The county has records. And the unsettling part? They believe that. I could see it in their faces. They weren't bluffing, they'd actually filed something. The question wasn't if, it was what. I'm calling Nancy, I said, already pulling out my phone. Go ahead, my dad replied, completely calm. She'll tell you the same thing. The house is ours now. Friday, Tyler. Be out by Friday. Then they left. And just like that, the countdown started. I called Nancy immediately. She sounded surprised but not panicked. They can file anything they want, she said. That doesn't make it valid. We need to see exactly what they submitted. She told me to go to the county recorder's office first thing Monday morning and pull the documents. That weekend dragged. I barely slept. My mind kept running through worst-case scenarios, trying to figure out how they could have pulled this off. Owen drove down Saturday to help. They forged something, he said, pacing my living room. Has to be. Either they faked your signature as trustee or created some kind of document transferring ownership. Either way, he added, it's fraud. Monday morning, I was at the recorder's office before they even opened. When the clerk pulled up the file, my stomach dropped. There it was. A quitclaim deed, filed just days earlier, transferring ownership of the house from the trust to my dad. Signed by me. Except, I had never signed anything. And the signature? It wasn't even close. This is forgery, I said, pointing at it. The clerk shifted uncomfortably. I can't make that determination, sir. You'll need to challenge it through the courts. Of course. I grabbed copies of everything and sent them straight to Nancy and Owen. Nancy called me back within minutes. They've committed multiple felonies, she said flatly. Forgery, fraud, possibly more. We need to move fast. Things escalated quickly after that. By Tuesday morning, Nancy had filed an emergency motion to void the fraudulent deed and secured a hearing for Thursday. She also reached out to the district attorney's office. At the same time, I started gathering everything. The original trust documents, with my real signature. Bank records showing no money had ever changed hands. Neighbors willing to confirm I'd been living there continuously. Owen helped me organize it all. The good thing about forgery, he said, is that it's usually obvious. Handwriting analysis, fake notary, no financial trail, they didn't think this through. Which honestly tracked. Wednesday evening my dad called. Tyler, we're coming tomorrow with movers, he said. Be packed. We're giving you time to say goodbye. For a second I almost laughed. Tomorrow's not going to go the way you think, I told him. Empty threats, he scoffed. Everything's already arranged. I didn't argue. There was no point. See you tomorrow, I said and hung up. Thursday morning came fast. I barely slept but adrenaline carried me. Owen showed up early. Nancy too. We sat in the living room drinking coffee, waiting. At exactly 9 a.m., a moving truck pulled up outside. Right on schedule. My parents got out of their car, Lindsay right behind them, still wearing those same confident expressions. Like they'd already won. The movers followed, looking confused the second they saw me standing there. I stepped out onto the porch. Owen and Nancy stood beside me. My dad's smile faded the moment he saw them. What's this? He asked. Nancy didn't hesitate. This, she said sharply, is me informing you that you've committed multiple felonies. And that law enforcement is on their way. Everything changed in an instant. My mom went pale. That's ridiculous, she said. We filed everything legally. Owen held up the documents. You filed a forged deed, he said. That's not Tyler's signature. The notary is fake. There's no record of payment. He paused, letting it sink in. You tried to steal a multi-million-dollar property. And for the first time, they didn't look so confident anymore. That's when everything started to unravel. Lindsay, who had been so confident 5 minutes earlier, suddenly looked like she might be sick. Dad, you said this would work, she whispered. You said the lawyer told you it was legal. I latched onto that immediately. What lawyer? I asked, because I already knew the answer. Nancy stepped forward slightly, calm but firm. I'm the estate attorney. And I can assure you, I had nothing to do with whatever this is. That's when my dad finally lost it. His whole expression shifted. You ungrateful piece of, he snapped. We're your parents. That house should be ours. It belonged to my father. And he chose to leave it to Tyler, Nancy cut in, not raising her voice but somehow completely shutting him down. Because he knew exactly what he was doing. There was a brief pause. Then she added, you can leave voluntarily. Or you can explain all of this to the police. Almost on cue, 2 patrol cars pulled up. The timing wasn't an accident. I'd spent most of Tuesday at the station walking officers through everything, every document, every inconsistency. They were already aware of what was going on. The movers didn't stick around long. The second they realized this wasn't just a family dispute, they quietly got back in their truck and left. I don't blame them. What happened next felt surreal. The officers started asking questions, simple ones at first. How did you obtain this deed? Who prepared these documents? My dad tried to talk his way through it, leaning on that same argument. It's my father's house. I have a right to it. My mom switched tactics immediately, tears, confusion, claiming they were told everything was legitimate. Lindsay just stood there, silent, like the reality was finally catching up to her. When the officer asked to see the paperwork, my dad hesitated, but eventually handed it over. The officer flipped through it, then shook his head. Sir, this is clearly forged. He pointed at the signature. This doesn't match the trustee's signature on file. The notary stamp isn't registered. And there's no record of this transfer being authorized. But we filed it with the county, my mom insisted. The officer didn't even blink. Filing a document doesn't make it legal, ma'am. Filing a fraudulent document is still a crime. Right then, another car pulled up. I recognized her immediately, Helen, the home care worker who had helped with my grandparents during their final years. I hadn't even known she was coming. She walked up with this quiet determination and didn't waste a second. These people, she said, pointing directly at my parents, they showed up maybe 4 times in the last 2 years. And every visit ended the same way, asking about money. She gestured toward me. Tyler was there every day. He took care of them, fed them, managed their meds, sat with them when they were scared. My mom tried to interrupt. Helen didn't let her. Dorothy told me once, she continued, voice tightening, that her biggest fear was her son stealing from Tyler after she was gone. That hit harder than I expected. She said, we have to protect our boy. And they did. There wasn't much left to argue after that. The officers informed my parents they were being charged. Attempted fraud, forgery, conspiracy. They read them their rights. And just like that, they were being taken away. Lindsay wasn't arrested, but they told her she'd likely be called as a witness. As my dad was being led to the car, he turned back one last time. You're dead to us, he said. I didn't raise my voice. I've been dead to you since I was 5, I replied. This isn't new. Then they were gone. And everything went quiet. I just stood there on the porch trying to process it all. Nancy put a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, she said. Maybe. But standing there looking at the house, at everything it represented, I couldn't help wondering if doing the right thing was always supposed to feel this heavy. You did the right thing, Nancy said again, steady and certain. Owen nodded. Your grandparents would be proud. And from a legal standpoint, you're completely covered. That trust isn't just strong, it's bulletproof. If anything, they made your position even safer by pulling something like this. Helen stepped closer and wrapped me in a hug. Frank and Dorothy loved you more than anything, she said softly. They talked about you all the time. How kind you were. How responsible. How you showed up for them when it mattered. She pulled back and looked me in the eyes. This house isn't yours because of paperwork. It's yours because you earned it. That stayed with me. Because deep down, that's what this was really about. Not money. Not property. Everything they built came from love, and I was just trying to protect that. The legal fallout dragged on for a few months. In the end, the case against my parents was straightforward. The evidence was overwhelming. Fake signatures, invalid notary, no financial trail. They were convicted of fraud and forgery. No jail time, but probation, heavy fines, and they were ordered to cover the legal costs they'd caused me. The judge didn't go easy on them either. He made a point of saying that trying to steal from your own child doesn't make things more understandable, it makes them worse. Lindsay didn't get charged, but she had to give a full deposition. Apparently, she knew what was happening. She just convinced herself it was technically legal because my dad kept repeating it. She sent me a short email later. An apology. I never replied. Some things, once they break, they don't go back. Living alone in that house has been strange. Comforting and painful at the same time. Every room carries something. My grandpa's chair by the fireplace. The kitchen where my grandma used to hum while cooking. The faint memory of them dancing in the living room when they thought I wasn't paying attention. At first, the silence was overwhelming. I caught myself talking out loud sometimes, telling them about my day, asking what they would have done. Every now and then, I swear I can almost hear my grandpa's laugh, or catch a hint of my grandma's perfume. Maybe that's just memory. Or maybe it's something else. About 6 months after everything happened, I made a decision that finally felt right. I used part of the trust to create the Frank and Dorothy Bennett Scholarship Fund at my university. It supports students who want to go into accounting, especially those interested in protecting people from financial abuse. It felt like the kind of thing they would have wanted. Something that keeps their values alive. As for my parents, I haven't spoken to them since that day. Sometimes I notice missed calls from unknown numbers. Emails that land straight in spam. I don't open them. I think I've accepted that whatever relationship we could have had, it's gone. And honestly, I'm not sure it was ever really there to begin with. But sometimes, late at night, sitting alone in that big house, I do wonder. Not about the money. Not about the property. Just about whether cutting them off completely, even after everything, makes me the kind of person my grandparents hoped I'd become. AITA for protecting what they built, even if it meant losing my family for good?